Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CDL podcast. This is the post-Seattle episode. Kind of going away with the episode numbers, as I said, because that just gets way too confusing. But before we get into anything, we're going to get into later on the matches from the weekend, my power rankings, some takeaways from the weekend, including a new segment I want to do involving some MVPs from winning and losing teams. But before we get into anything like that, I want to give a huge thank you. So far, we've been getting kind of a modest amount of views on each video, which is completely fine because I'm more just doing this out of passion for the community and to try to provide more content for you guys to watch, because sometimes there can be a lack of it in this community. But my last video blew me away. We got almost 500 views in like the first few days of the video. Over 10 new subs from it. The support on that video alone was just amazing. Like I said, we've been getting like 50, 60, 70, 80 views, which, I mean, for just starting out, I feel it's pretty good, and I'm pretty proud of that. But we got like nearly 500 views, tons of new comments, lots of new subscribers. So that was just amazing to see, and I was really blown away and humbled by that, and I wanted to give you guys a huge thanks for that. So yeah, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more in the outro on the end of the video. But yeah, thank you so much for the support. That was amazing, and I hope we can keep it up. Like I said, I'm not really doing this to get tons of views and subscribers, but if they come along, they come along. It's more just out of passion. But to start the actual podcast, I'm going to go over the matches first and how accurate my predictions were for this weekend, like I always like to do. And I will say they were pretty accurate. Actually, this might have been my best week of predictions, I think. I know I got all four teams that came out of groups right. I don't think I got the winners part and the losers part exactly right in Group A, but I know I did in Group B. I think I actually got every match but maybe one in Group B right, and my predictions were very accurate overall. But we'll just get into... I picked Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Optic, and London Royal Ravens to come out of their groups, which they all did. And then I picked the final wrong. I had Subliners playing, or I had Optic playing Huntsmen, which was actually possible, but they ended up losing 3-2. But we'll just get into the first round first. We'll only talk about the matchups that were actually good matchups or close matchups. We'll touch on each one, but only go into detail on the ones that were actually good matches. So first of all, right away, we'll start with Group A in the top of the bracket. It was London versus the LA Gorillas. This kind of changed the weekend for London in my eyes. They got off to kind of a slow start in this first match that they had. They actually only won 3-2 against the Los Angeles Gorillas, which, I mean, if you know anything about these two teams, in my opinion, like I've said forever, London is a very good team, I think. Clearly a step or two above of the LA Gorillas. They're a much better overall team. But it was a 3-2 match that could have very easily gone the way of the LA Gorillas, which obviously changed the whole weekend of London. It gave them confidence, like, hey, our new roster can win. We can do this. So they were able to win that one 3-2 and move on in a close one. The Gorillas surprised me there. Then the next match in that group, Seattle Surge versus Subliners. The Subliners were able to handle them pretty easily, 3-1. Not too much to talk about there. They handled them pretty easily. Surge, once again, they subbed in Enable for the first day. They didn't play too well, and then for some reason they like subbed them out in the second day. That's just a whole mess. I don't really know how to get into that one. I'm going to wait a little bit to get into that, maybe until the next episode, like the pre-show for the next event, because I'm not 100% sure what's really going on there. It's just a weird situation. Then the knockout match one in that group was the Gorillas versus Surge. This is the matchup I had so far. This bracket was perfect for me, but I picked the Surge to win this because, as you guys know, I have no faith in the Gorillas, but they actually impressed me this weekend. They were able to play a close match against London, then they took out the Surge, which it's not like the Surge are some amazing team, so it's not like some super impressive win for the Gorillas. But if you've been following the CDL at all this year, you know that the Gorillas have lost, I think it's 4 matches to Seattle. All of Seattle's CDL points have come by beating the Gorillas. So sometimes there's teams like that in sports and Call of Duty and anything where it's just like, even if you're a better team than them or evenly matched with them or even just a little worse, just for some reason certain teams just have your number, and for whatever reason, the way that they play, their styles maybe, the Surge just had the LA Gorillas number, and they were finally able to pull out the win. So to me, that's a pretty impressive win for them, just because it's kind of like getting over that hump of a team that just constantly has your number. So the Gorillas were able to knock out the Surge 3-1. Surge, get out of here only winning 2 maps. Absolutely rough weekend for them. It's roster change time, we'll say that, like we said for a few weeks now. And then the first qualifier match was London versus New York. I believe in this one I picked New York in like a 3-2 series, and then I think I said I wouldn't be surprised if London is able to win it 3-0, 3-1, anything. And London won it 3-0. They handled them pretty easily, which came to the surprise of me because, as I said in the pre-show for this event, I think that to me, like London and New York were in that 4 to 6 range for teams. I think I had London as the 7th team in the power rankings like 2 podcasts ago, and I believe I had New York at like 5, maybe 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. So I believe these 2 teams are kind of on the same level. I think they're 2 of the most even teams in the league in terms of where I put them. I think they're both like middle of the road, kind of upper middle of the road with small potential to win an event. They could take one. So I expected this to be a 3-2 really close match, but London absolutely blew them out of the water. 3-0, extremely impressive to me. I didn't see this coming. I thought it would be a close series. But London was extremely impressive. They finally were the team that I've been saying they should be all year, and they beat the Subliners 3-0. Then in the knockout match 2, we had the Subliners versus the Gorillas. No shock here. The Subliners take them out 3-1. But an impressive weekend from the Gorillas overall for me. I actually have a small amount of faith in them to maybe climb out of the absolute bottom of the barrel now after watching a close series against a team that made a final. London, they lost 3-2. They beat the Surge, and then they fought okay, got a map, had some other close maps against the Subliners, and lost 3-1. So out of that group, the winning team was the London Royal Ravens, and the loser was New York Subliners. So I got the 2 teams out of the group right. I just had them flipped. I had New York coming out of winners and London coming out of losers. But hey, at least I got my 2 teams out of there right, because I know a lot of people pick Seattle to get out of there for some reason. But nope, I got my 2 teams right out of that group. And then Group B, the first match, I think everybody picked the same team, Chicago versus Paris. I believed it was going to be a Chicago 3-0. Paris was able to take, I believe, the domination. I know Chicago had said they didn't get a ton of practice in domination before this tournament. Obviously, being a new team, they're probably focusing on their hard point mostly, being that it is 2 maps of the series, most likely, in their search and destroy as well, just going over some coverages and stuff, and some setups, some strategies, some breakoffs and stuff. And they were able to take this one 3-1, no shock there. And then the next match, Minnesota Rocker, OGLA. I actually picked OGLA, but like I said, I think this one could very, very, very easily go either way. Wouldn't shock me if one team 3-0'd the other. Wouldn't shock me. Any kind of outcome in this series wouldn't shock me. To me, once again, this is that group of teams from 4 to 7 that I said, with New York, Optic, Minnesota, and London, where I can see any of them beating each other at any time. And unfortunately, Minnesota wins this one to make my prediction wrong. But I believe Slasher and them, I know they complain a lot about connection stuff, but I think they said there was some like major issue, and we'll get into that like with TJ and stuff later in the tournament. But there was some major issue with connection here, and they lost to them 3-2, but they'd play them later, and it might be a different story then. So with Minnesota winning that sent Optic down to the knockout match 1, which was Paris versus OGLA. No shock here, OGLA beats Paris 3-1. Paris has kind of fallen off, like we said last time. People have caught up to them in terms of their knowledge of the game. They were kind of ahead of a lot of teams, which helped them to win games. But now people have caught up to them. They have even or better knowledge, or even slightly worse, but they're just the least talented team in the league probably. So OGLA is able to take them out 3-1. I kind of like to see a Paris versus the LA Gorillas match, just to see, because talent-wise they're decently even, and I just would like to see who would win that match, but we haven't gotten that one, I don't think, in a long time, if not all year. But OGLA takes them out 3-1, knocking out Paris Legion without a map, or not without a map win, but without a series win. They were only able to win 2 maps, just like the Surge. And then in our first qualifier match, it was Chicago versus Minnesota. Chicago's kind of had Minnesota's number this year. They were able to take them out 3-0. It was a pretty handled series by Chicago. I know some people were doubting them a little bit after that first match against Paris, because some of the maps were a little closer than people expected. It was a little shaky, and people were kind of like, okay, is Chicago with Prestinni worse than with Gunless? It's a little shaky, we don't know. And then here they come out, Minnesota, a top team. They were able to handle them pretty easily, 3-0 to knock them to the losers and get out of their group. Then the knockout match 2, we had Minnesota Rocker, OGLA, the rematch of their winners round 1 match. And once again, I picked OGLA to come out of this matchup. This is the matchup I had down here, was Minnesota versus OGLA. I had it getting there a little different, but I had this one, and I picked OGLA to win this one. I thought it would be another close series, but OGLA absolutely smoked them, showing that maybe those connection issues were actually a thing, because now when they supposedly had a cleaner connection to the server, they absolutely smoked them 3-0. Minnesota gets knocked out, and for Minnesota, struggles continue. They haven't really been able to get out of their group for a while. They've been continually struggling, so maybe it's roster change time. To me, some people panic a little early. I don't think it's roster change time. I think they just got to kind of work through their flaws, and then if they can't, maybe they make a roster change. But I think they got to continue to try working through their flaws, because they've been such a fundamentally solid team. But it does look bad considering they played the two best teams in their group in qualifier match and then a knockout match too, and they were 3-0'd by Chicago and Optic. Not a good look. But in this group, I predicted the winner team out, Chicago, and the loser team out, Optic, perfectly right. So I was 4 for 4 on my semifinal predictions, which I thought was pretty good, because in this tournament, a lot of people thought that there was 3 potential teams from each bracket that could make it out. Nobody thought Paris or LA Grillas would make it out, but a lot of people thought that Surge or Minnesota could make it out, but I correctly predicted that they actually wouldn't. So I was pretty proud of those predictions, some of my better ones in the year. And then we'll quickly get into the semifinals. The Sunday on this tournament was pretty good. I would say it was worse than last Sunday, not due to any casters or anything. I mean, the casters are always fantastic, in my opinion, best in esports. But just due to the gameplay, there wasn't as many close series. I mean, last week, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, the last event was just crazy with the close matchups we had. They were amazing. But this weekend, we had the London versus OGLA, and what a great match that one was, though. I remember when that Game 3 Dom came up, London goes up 2-1 because they were up 2-0 in the series. They won the first hardpoint in a close one, and then the search, they win. And then the domination, OGLA wins to put them down 2-1. And then the hardpoint, I thought it was over there. It looked like London had the series. Kenny, I know on the cast they mentioned it too. Kenny and TJ, the kind of the subs for OGLA, were absolutely just getting dominated by Dylan and Zero. They were kind of pushing them out. Shawnee as well. They were kind of pushing them out. Subs on London were kind of taking over the series versus Kenny and TJ. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Optic goes on a tear. Slasher goes absolutely super sane. He had like a 46-22 game, I want to say it was. An absolutely incredible game from Slasher to just will them to a victory on that Ramaza hardpoint game 4, and they force a game 5 on Gunrunner S&D, which I guess is London's best map. They're very, very good at it, and London handled them pretty easy. I think it's like a 6-2, 6-3 there. It wasn't much of a map. Dylan was just playing super, super hyper aggressive, just all in their face, and had a crazy good map. Was able to take that one for the team, and they win that map 5 pretty easily. And there was that issue, obviously, with TJ's nade. On the stream, it looked like he just kind of screwed up his nade and threw it into the box in fast motion. The casters were kind of all on him. They obviously revoked that when TJ posted the clip and Hecz talked about it and stuff. I mean, he clearly threw that nade over that box. There was no way. And then the nade kind of disappeared, like he didn't throw it, and glitched onto the box. And people were like, well, what was his reaction? Why did he look at it then turn away? Well, I mean, if you're throwing a grenade clearly over the box like that, and then all of a sudden you throw it and it disappears, you think, okay, well, it just kind of glitched, went in the room in front of me that I was throwing it to. Then all of a sudden it appears in the box in front of you. That look to the nade was kind of like a wait, what? Why is the nade there all of a sudden? And then he had to try to run away, and then it killed him. So people were roasting him for well, even if it glitched, how'd you not run away? Okay, well, in that situation, you're in a game 5 semifinal trying to make it to a final of a tournament, a lot of pressure, money on the line, and a nade glitches, and your reaction time isn't going to be flawless to be glitch, instantly turn away and run. He was shocked that it happened, unfortunate that it happened. Personally, I don't think it changes the map that much. I think London was winning that map either way, but obviously that doesn't matter. It's still a problem. It needs to be adjusted, whether the servers need to get an improvement or whatever it needs to be. I don't think it changes the map, so at least there's that. It wasn't like it was a round 11 1v1. TJ was about to shoot him in the back. He starts tossing a nade or something, and then it kills them and it screws up the whole series. I still think London probably wins the map. They're probably going to win that map regardless of that TJ killing himself there. But, I mean, you'd like to not have it happen because, I mean, in that situation, it maybe didn't matter. But if it happens in a 1v1 round 11 where it glitches and somebody kills himself instead of being able to possibly win the 1v1 and it costs somebody a map, that could be absolutely just dumb. You don't want to see it happen. You want everything to be legit. So hopefully that gets addressed. But London, super impressive this weekend, wins that over OGLA. Then down in the other semifinal matchup, Chicago versus New York. Chicago takes that one 3-1. fairly easy matchup for them. They kind of dominated it. But another impressive weekend from New York. They're able to get out of their group once again, which sometimes you'd say, it's not that impressive. They got out of their group. But considering where they were, getting out of their group, pretty darn good for them. And then obviously they run into a buzzsaw, the best team there this weekend, maybe the best team in the game. Not going to go that far yet, but a top 3 team clearly. They run into that buzzsaw and they lose, but a good weekend again from New York. So Chicago advances to the final. And then in the final, it was kind of all Chicago. They won it fairly easily. Besides the Dom was a crazy game. Scump was going big all finals long. I wouldn't say Scump was the MVP for Chicago on the weekend, but he could maybe be finals MVP. He went big with a couple 1v2, 1v3s in the search. Then in the Dom, he went absolutely massive, getting like a 2-piece on, I think it was the 8th leg on Gunrunner to save it. Then he gets a neutral to then a cap to make him win 155, 154. An absolutely crazy map from Scump. And then in that game 4 hardpoint, they kind of dominated London. Scump went like double positive. Arcitys went like double positive, which is why I say Scump might be finals MVP. He had a couple big rounds, like 1v2s and stuff in the search. He had a decent map 1. In the Dom, he had like the game-saving 2-piece to cap the flag to win the game. And then in the hardpoint, he went double positive when it was just being completely annoying as kind of like an entry aggressive sub. Picking up all the kills, picking up rotations and spawns. And Arcitys was doing that as well, going double positive. It's probably Arcitys or Scump are like your finals MVPs. They handle them pretty easily 3-1. An impressive weekend for London, but unfortunately a lot of those players are still not able to get their first win. So that was about the matches on the weekend. I hope you guys enjoyed that analysis. Then quickly I'll go over the new point standings following the weekend. Obviously the points are a little skewed and stuff because now there's some teams who have played more events than others. Chicago's in first with 180. FaZe is in second with 170, Empire in third with 150. Now this is a little skewed because Chicago has played 6 events and FaZe and Empire have played 5. So technically, if FaZe makes it to the semifinal, they're already ahead of Huntsmen, and if Empire makes it to the final, they're ahead of Huntsmen. Then with 6 events played in fourth, Minnesota Rocker with 120. Florida, 5 events played, stays at 105th. London gains 30 points this weekend with 6 events played and moves into 6th with 80 points. 7th is OGLA with 70. With 6 events played, they gained 20 points. Then tied for 8th, Paris and New York with 60 apiece, both 6 events played. Surge and Ultra tied for 10th with 40 points apiece. Ultra have only played 5 events, though. And then the Gorillas gained 10 points to get to 30. They're in 12th with 6 events played. So right now it's looking like pretty close at the top. First and fourth are only 60 points apart, which sounds kind of like a lot, but you can get 30 points just for making a final, so you can cut that in half. And if you win an event, you're 50 points, you're almost there. So, they're an event win away from basically being on top. Then there's a pretty big jump below that. It goes all the way down to 80 for 6th place. So top 3 teams seem to be pretty locked in unless Minnesota goes on a tear or something and wins like back-to-back events. But the points look pretty close, especially towards like the bottom teams, the teams that might start losers for champs. Down there it's from 6th to 12th, it's 80, 70, 60, 60, 40, 40, 30. So, those teams are all, one of them sneaks in and wins an event somehow. They shoot right up and they get out of the losers bracket or something. So then, now that we've gone over the matches and stuff, I kind of want to do my new segment here since we just talked about the matches. I don't want to talk about the matches, take a break for power rankings and stuff, then all of a sudden get into MVPs. I kind of want to do a new segment where I kind of pick my MVP from the event, which I know there's a big controversy in this in sports and stuff. Like, does the winning team have to have like the MVP and stuff? For this segment specifically, I'm going to say I want to name an event MVP who has to be from the winning team. Now, I'm of the argument kind of in the past that MVPs could be from the losing team, because if the winning team is 5 players who all were just really, really good, but no one kind of stood out, and then like the second place team got absolutely carried by somebody, and they just like kind of like last year, like Reciprocity, they got like third once, but if they were able to make it to a final and Dylan was like a 1.4 going absolutely crazy, but it was like 100 Thieves where everybody had like 1s, and then like Enable had like a 0.8 and everybody had like 1.1s. There's no like clear MVP. I know a lot of times there was kind of a clear MVP, like Slasher or Octane or somebody would have a big weekend. But if it was like 100 Thieves, everybody's kind of like dead even, no clear MVP, and then you've got Dylan with a 1.4 on the other team on Reciprocity, he could kind of maybe get the MVP. So I'm going to do the event MVP required to be from the winning team, and then a non-winning team MVP, somebody that kind of stood out. And for the non-winning team MVP, I'm going to put a disclaimer, especially for this week. It's not who I think was the best player on the weekend. It's somebody who I think, with certain circumstances, did really well or really helped his team a lot. So this week, I don't think he was the best player on a non-winning team, but I think he brought a lot to a new team that really helped them to become better. So my event MVP winning team, I'm going to go with Formal. Like I said, I think Scump or Arcitys deserves finals MVP. I think overall for the year, Envoy is the team's MVP. He's been the best player. I think Prestinni, you can make an argument. He had probably the worst stats on the team this weekend, but once again, stats and everything, he still had pretty good stats. He had like 0.9s and everything, and then like a 1.3 something S&D, which is obviously amazing. A 1.3 in S&D, 1.3 in any mode is amazing. But he had like, I think he had like a 0.8 something in hardpoint, like a 0.9 something in dom, and like a 1.3 in search. I mean, a great weekend, especially because he's probably the player that's going to have the worst KD in the team, because he's going to be the guy flying in with an entry. That's just how it goes when that's your role. Unless you're an absolute freak, you're probably going to have the worst KD in your team being an entry player. That's just what an entry player does. That's no knock on Prestinni. He's a great player, is a great player, was a great player. Currently helps the team a lot. But I think you got to give it to Formal. I believe he had the best KD in the team with a 1.22. And the other reason I kind of say you got to give it to Formal is because Arcitys has been pretty good all year. Scump was good in the beginning of the year, and it's been consistently solid. Envoy's been the best player. Prestinni's new, and he was good when he was on Florida, but Formal struggled this year. I think Maven or Merc mentioned it as a main AR in the Jetpack games when Formal really stood out. He was able to just fly around the map. And since he's just frankly more skilled than most players, was able to just gun everyone as he flew around the map. But now he's got to be more anchored and stationary and play smarter. And I think it's taking him a little getting used to that. Not saying Formal's not a smart player, because you don't become like a 25-time champ or whatever by not being a smart player. He's clearly a smart player. But he's never really been a main AR in like a boots game. He kind of was in World War II, but then again with Optic, he played a sub for like the first half of the year. And then last year, he was a main AR for part of it. But then when they picked up the new young guns like Brack and Skies, he's kind of switched to the Maddox. So he hasn't been consistently a main AR really since the Jetpack game, since IW. So now with him with a main AR in his hands, he's kind of getting used to that in the boots game and a slower game. And he finally came into his own, dropped a 1.22, was making huge plays all weekend. So I'm going to name him the MVP. Then the non-winning team MVP, once again, I don't think that this is like the best player on the weekend or anything by any means, but I'm kind of giving like a co-MVP. I think Zero and Dylan deserve like a co-MVP. To me, Zero and didn't have like the craziest stats. I mean, there's probably players with better stats on a different team, but London couldn't get to a semifinal since like the first event. They struggled. They couldn't beat any good teams. And then here they come, they make a semifinal. They make it all the way to the finals. The only series they lost was the final this weekend. Zero clearly improved the team a lot, kind of being like an entry guy, sub, even getting like picking up 2 pieces on an entry. And then the other reason the co-MVP with Zero is Dylan is because Dylan finally looked a little bit like BO4 Dylan. He kind of burst onto the scene last year, like his first year really on the main stage on the scene, and was an absolute freak. You can make an argument that for the whole year and at points of the year, he was the best player in the game. And if you don't think he was the best player in the game, you have to admit he was like top 3 sub. He was right up there with Simp and Abizi. I mean, he was one of the best subs in the game. Even if you don't want to say he's top 3, he's top 5, no doubt. I mean, you can make arguments that I can't remember what tournament it was, but when Reciprocity got 3rd and he went absolutely crazy, even at Champs, when he was going absolutely crazy, I mean, he was one of, if not the best player in the game. Absolutely insane player. And finally, he's been struggling all year this year. He hasn't looked comfortable with his team, kind of can't fly as much, maybe because he doesn't trust his teammates as much as he did last year. But finally, he looked so good this weekend, and I think that makes London extremely scary because with players like Wuskin playing like such a good main AR, Scrap started to come around even better this weekend. We know how talented he is. Zero, we know how talented he is. He looked good. And then Shawnee, kind of a more consistent OBJ type player. He looked very good this weekend. And now all of a sudden, if Dylan's coming around to BO4 for him, watch out. So for me, non-winning team MVP is kind of a co between Zero and Dylan. The subs of London were really a strong showing this weekend. So now that we've talked about MVPs and matches and stuff, I want to get into the power rankings. They've shifted a little bit, but certain things haven't changed. We'll kind of do power rankings and then kind of put the teams in tiers and stuff. So for me, I have a weird thing about the top three. I don't really like to change my top three unless it's clear to me. I like to shift more around the middle because to me those aren't as meaningful. But to me, if you're willing to put a team at number one, you better be damn sure that they're better than the team that you're taking out of the number one spot. So like a lot of people I know with the crazy following the Huntsmen have and stuff, after they win this event and they have Prestinni roster change, they looked very, very good. You can certainly make an argument they're in the number one team, but I think people are going to be upset with me saying I think it's too early to put them there because to me, I don't think I can definitively say that the Huntsmen are better than the Empire and FaZe, but I think 2 weeks ago before this event, you could definitively say that FaZe and Empire were better than Chicago. When they had gunless and roster changes were going on, I think you could definitively say that FaZe and Empire were better than Chicago at that point. They both had 2 event wins, and they just frankly looked better. They had been in finals more recently. They had one more recently. And then Empire and FaZe weren't there this weekend, so they weren't able to continue proving that they're better than Chicago. Now, do I think Chicago is better than Empire or FaZe? Certainly, I think there's a possibility. But I'd like to see them all at the same event, and I'd like to see Empire and FaZe play at least. I don't remember if all 3 are at the next event, or if 2 out of 3. I'm assuming FaZe and Empire both are there. I don't know if Chicago's there. I can't remember. But I want to see FaZe and Empire play, and if they look like they have cracks in the armor and look a little worse, then maybe Chicago jumps to 1. But for now, I'm keeping FaZe at 1, Empire at 2, and Chicago at 3. Now, basically, if I'm being honest with you, they're basically 1, 1, and 1 for me because they each have 2 event wins. Chicago looks vastly improved. Dallas, in my opinion, would be below the 2, but since it's online, Dallas is even better. Dallas would still be number 3 if it was LAN, in my opinion, but I think they're kind of up there in the 1 and 2 conversation because of the online aspect. And then, to me, talent-wise and overall, LAN or not, Atlanta is the best team in the game, so I have them at 1. But to me, this is a 1A, 1B, 1C situation. They're pretty much dead even on my scale. I just want to see them all at the same event, and I want to see them play each other, and then from there we can rank them. But to me, this is where the tier 1 ends. I think all 3 teams, now I think I had Chicago kind of on like a 1B tier last time, but Chicago's officially entered the A tier, again, the 1 tier. So for me, tier 1, Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, in that order, subject to change. I reserve the right to change that at any point. That's subject to change. Those 3 haven't moved in the power rankings basically all year. They're the top 3, no doubt. They're tier 1. And then number 4 for me, I have OGLA. I have my other list of my power rankings from 2 episodes ago from the pre-Florida show. I did not have OGLA here. They actually jumped from 6. I had Subliners here at 4 last time. So we have OGLA jumping to 4. Some people might not agree with this. The opinions on OGLA are crazy. I mean, they're all over the place. People hate them because they're the fake optic or whatever. But to me, I'm not looking at that. I'm purely looking at the team. Not anything involving the organization or whatever, unless it's something with dysfunction or something like that, but not anything involving like personal bias. OGLA to me is the 4th best team in the game. Talent-wise, you could argue they could be the most talented team. I mean, we said it a million times, TJ, Kenny, Slasher, Dashy. I mean, Chino. If Chino's your 5th best player in your team, you got a pretty good team. They have an extremely talented team. You could argue they're number 1 in talent, which is why I have them at number 4. Since Chino's been in, they've made it to a final and now a semifinal. And now if the rumors are true that Gunless is going there for Chino, vibe-wise, Slasher, Gunless, history and stuff, I don't know how that works out, but that might be the most talented team in COD history. I mean, apart from Prime Optic for the team of 4, I mean, that was AW and stuff. I mean, Dashy, you can make arguments at times in his career best player in the game. TJ, World War II, you can make arguments and stuff that he was one of the best players, top 5 in the game. Slasher, you can always make an argument he's been the best in the game in certain titles, especially like BO3, IW. Then you look at Kenny, my mind best player, no doubt in World War II, and one of the top players by the end of the year in BO4. I mean, Gunless, arguably best player overall for the whole year, if you kind of take out champs for IW. So, I mean... You look at those 5 players, you can make an argument if they get Gunless that all 5 have been the best player in the game at some point in their career and recently, and I would argue that all 5 still have that ability to be the best player in the game. So talent-wise, if they get Gunless, they're the most talented team in the league. There's no doubt in my mind. Even maybe over FaZe, that would be just an absolute superstar matchup. FaZe Optic, which I know the Optic fans aren't really Optic fans anymore, but that'd be a match that the league's got to be drooling over. FaZe Optic being possibly your 2 best teams. So I put them at 4 simply because I think they're fairly even with teams like New York, London, and Minnesota. But to me, talent-wise, they just have more talent than those other 3 teams, so I put them at 4. And then New York Subliners I have at 5. They dropped from number 4 on my previous power rankings. This isn't like a, oh my god, they're so much worse than they were before, so they dropped 1 spot, not a big drop. And the only reason they dropped is because, to me, OGLA is more talented. I think OGLA has potential to win any event that they go to. I think they could have won this past weekend. So I put OGLA ahead of them just because I think they're kind of on the same level. Either of them could beat each other at any point. But to me, OGLA's just got more talent, so they fall ahead of New York. And then London is at 6. I think this was my biggest jump from the previous power rankings before the last event. Yeah, London was at 9. Now I have them at 6. I could even see them jumping New York. I know they beat New York and everything, but I want to see a little bit more. New York's been consistent for like 2 events now, being very good. And London's only been consistent for 1. Do I personally think that after the next event that they both play at, London jumps New York? Yes. As you know, I've been on the London hype train all year. I'm a huge Zero fan. I think he's one of the most underrated players in COD history. I just think he's been unfortunately stuck with like the European roster lock. And I mean, let's face it, in the past few years, Europe hasn't been as talented. So I think that kind of affected him. Yeah, so when we look at London, I think, I put him below New York right now, like I said, because New York's been more consistent over the past few events, but I think London, Zero, like I said, his talent and everything, he probably jumps New York for me, maybe next event. But because of the consistency of New York over the past 2 events versus the consistency of London over only 1 event, I put New York ahead of them. But once again, like I said, would not shock me at all if London would jump into the 5 spot. I would expect by the end of the next event, I'm going to have London ahead of New York unless something crazy happens. Or like I said, I haven't actually really done my research yet to see who's playing at the next event. So if London's not playing, that's my apologies. I really can't have them jump too much unless New York absolutely has a terrible performance or something. Then London might jump ahead of them. And then here's kind of our biggest fall. We didn't really have any huge falls, but they dropped from 5 to 7, and they kind of fall to the low end. This is the end of my tier 2 right here. So they kind of fell from kind of the top of tier 2 to the bottom of tier 2 for me. Minnesota Rocker fall from 5 to 7. I still think that they're a really good team. I don't want to say that they're like a bad team or anything all of a sudden. I still think they're a very good team. But at the same time, they've now for 2 or 3 events kind of slacked off big time. Overall, they've kind of been lackluster. They've been able to win still against the teams that are worse than them for sure, and they've been able to make it to like the second round of their group and stuff, but they haven't gotten out of the group in I think now 2 straight events. And even if they did get out of the group 2 events ago, I can't remember, they didn't make it to the finals or anything. So they've struggled recently, and they were 3-0'd by Chicago and OGLA, which Chicago I think is a tier above them, but I think OGLA is kind of on their same tier, and they were 3-0 smoked out of the tournament by them. Back-to-back 3-0s to knock them out. And apparently OGLA was lagging really bad in that first match that they beat them, so who knows if they even should have beat them in that one. But like I said, they're still taking care of business versus those bottom tier teams, so they're clearly ahead of them. I don't think it's like panic mode time yet for the Rocker. I don't think it's time to like make a roster change. But at the same time, if they were to pick up a player like Gunless and replace somebody just to get more of a superstar on their team with GodRx, it might not be the worst thing, but there's absolutely no need to for sure do something like that because, I mean, they're still clearly a good team. I mean, they still play the game super fundamentally sound. Maybe just a little bit of a slump. We see certain teams, especially teams like Minnesota, now that I'm thinking about it, we see teams like Gen G kind of went through a little mini slump in the year, and your teams that are not your most talented but seem to know the game the best, Elevate and BO3 and stuff, I always go back to them because it reminds me of this team a lot. There's always one team each year that's kind of like this, Gen G, Elevate, those kind of teams, where they're super fundamentally sound. They have the talent, but they're not top tier talent. But the talent is there. They have like kind of middle of the road or better talent, but they just play so well together that they're just such a good team. To me, that's Minnesota this year, as I've said before. And I think they have the ability to jump right back up to 4 at some point. But to me, since their recent skid, if they were to match up against OGLA, New York, or London right now, I would be picking OGLA, New York, or London to beat them because of their recent skid. So until Minnesota comes together, gets out of this slump, and proves to me that they're still the team that we knew that they were on LAN early in the year, then I'm going to put them at 7. But I still have them in that tier 2 towards the bottom of it now. But because I think that they could beat OGLA, New York, and London at any moment and possibly win an event because they're kind of right there with them. but I think that I have to put them below those 3 right now because I would pick those 3 over them. But that's the end of tier 2, so they're still in there. And then number 8, Toronto Ultra. To me, this was like the most disappointing team that wasn't there. Not saying like they were like the most disappointing. That's not really how I meant it. They're not the most disappointing team right now, but it was the most disappointing to me that they weren't at this event because we saw them in a Game 5, Round 11 in the semifinal last tournament to make it all the way to the final. I mean, and if you've been watching the league all year and you know anything, Toronto's been kind of like a bottom 2 or 3 team all year. They've been viewed as one of the worst teams in the league, switching their roster all the time, benching a storied player like Looney. Like, everybody's like, what are you doing? Even me, I was like, I don't really know why you're benching Looney. That's kind of weird. But I was so disappointed when I saw the lineup for this weekend and that Toronto wasn't on it, because it's not like there's some super crazy team that I was going to pick to win the event, but I really want to see how they'd follow up being one round in Search and Destroy away from being in the final. I wanted to see how they'd follow it up with a performance. So I have them at 8. I believe I had them at 8 in the last power rankings. Let me look here. No, I actually had them at 7. But London was able to jump ahead of them because right now, I mean, if London and Toronto played, I'd pick London. So I had London jump ahead of them just due to the fact that Toronto, they didn't play this weekend, but I'm really, really, really excited to see them play at the next event because, like I said, they were one round away from a final in the last event out of nowhere. Nobody expected that, and then all of a sudden, boom, here they are. So I'm really excited to see them play, but I have them at 8, kind of the start of the tier 3. And then the only other team that I have in this tier 3 would be the Florida Mutineers. They were at, I forget what I had them in my last one. I had them at 8. Here they're at 9. So they just dropped 1 spot. They didn't play this weekend, but like I said, London was below them, and London is clearly a better team than them right now. Who knows with Awakening? I don't really know much about him at all. I know even less about him really than some of the other players. I know a lot of people like Champs last year, qualifying for Champs. People said he was a really good player. I know Parasite says he's a really good player, but I feel like Parasite says every AM that he's played with that makes it somewhere, he like praises him so hard in hopes that maybe he can get on a roster or something. But Awakening could maybe change his team, make them better. But they're at the number 9 spot for me. Not too much to talk about with them here. They didn't play. But that's the end of the tier 3 for me, just Toronto and Florida. And then the bottom tier, I think I'm going to put all these 3 teams together. Usually I make a special tier for who's ever number 12, but to me, they're all just kind of bottom of the barrel teams. I kind of want to put my number 10 team, Seattle Surge, at a tier 4 and then put the bottom 2 at tier 5, but I'm just going to throw them all together because to me, they're all just not good right now. Seattle Surge, 10. Feel horrible for Octane. I thought this was the weekend. The last event we saw them at, they were in the semifinal. I thought this was the weekend. If they were going to finally prove that they're a good team, it's now or never because they're bringing Enable back. They got Enable, Apathy, Karma, Octane, Slacked, all the storied players. For me, this was the weekend for them to turn up and be like, okay, here we are. We made it to the semifinal last time. Let's make it to a final on our home series and prove that we're a good team. They didn't do it. They won 2 maps. Feel horrible for Octane. Only hope I think this team has is Karma usually is able to show up at Champs. Apathy is historically more of an end-of-the-year player, which, I mean, we're to the end of the year, so it's time for him to pick it up. Even though he did last event, he was pretty good. Overall, the team was just kind of chalk this weekend. But Apathy, historically a great Champs player. He's a 2-time champion. Could argue he could have possibly been even an MVP in a couple of those Champs. Great end-of-the-year player, so they have some potential. I mean, whenever you got Octane on your team and Apathy for Champs, I feel like you got potential. So I kind of want to put them on a separate tier, but I'm just going to throw them all in one tier for now. But they're definitely the most potential team down here. Then you might be shocked by number 11. I've had them at number 12 every single week in my power rankings, but I put the LA Gorillas at number 11 because this is the second event in a row now where they were able to win one series, and Paris hasn't been able to win a series in like the last 2 or 3 or how many events. Paris just doesn't look good. I mean, both these teams are bottom of the barrel, but at least LA Gorillas played London to a game 5 and then took a map off. I can't remember who they played in that second losers match, but they were able to take a map off them, I think in New York or whatever, but they were able to win one match, and Paris just looked terrible. They lost both matches, only winning one map. Granted, they played Minnesota and Chicago, so tough teams. But, I mean, if these two teams played now, I'd have no idea who to pick. I mean, I probably would pick the Gorillas, but, I mean, if Paris won 3-0, I wouldn't be shocked. To me, these are the 2 bottom teams, so they're kind of in that tier 2. But that's it for the power rankings. So we went Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, OGLA, New York, London, Minnesota, Toronto, Florida, Seattle, LA Gorillas, and then Paris Legion. I think that's the most confident I felt in my power rankings all year. I kind of actually like, sometimes I feel like between 6 and 7 I can kind of jump them, but with the current state, this is definitely going to shift. Like I said, I think that top 3 will shift by champs a little bit. Somebody will take the number 1 spot, or Dallas and Chicago will shift or something. But I feel pretty confident that power rankings for where the teams are right now is pretty accurate. Like I said, Minnesota, New York, OGLA, London, they could all kind of shift between that 4 and 7, and depending on what Toronto does, they could shift, but I feel pretty confident overall. And then the last little segment, this video has been pretty long so far, this podcast pretty long, but the last little segment I want to get into is one that I always do in my post shows. I want to kind of get into my big takeaways. I used to do like the 5 big takeaways, but now I'm just kind of doing just takeaways in general. I think I actually do have 5 this week that I kind of like track down here, but sometimes it might only be 1 big takeaway or 2 or 3 or something. I don't think it'll ever really go over 5, but we're going to do just my big takeaways, something that I took away from this weekend. So the first one is my predictions were pretty damn on for the teams I thought had great potential. Not my predictions like for the weekend, but I've been riding the train of London and OGLA all year, saying they have crazy talent. And OGLA kind of proved me right last weekend with their finals appearance, but now I think they kind of solidified that like they're here to stay as like a really good team, like a top 5 team, making a semifinal. And I mean, they ran into kind of a buzzsaw, a weird fluky series maybe against London, but they played them very well 3-2. So I think OGLA kind of finally proved me right. That my prediction on their potential was certainly right, which a lot of people, I mean, that's not like a crazy prediction with their roster. I think everybody predicted that they had great potential. And then my other one that's a little bit more kind of, not everybody was on this train. I was on this train all year. I've been saying London has great talent and great potential, and now finally maybe they found their roster. So that's a big takeaway for me, is that, you know, I've been riding those 2 teams all year, like, come on. They have so much talent. They're going to do it. And now finally they kind of, that having faith in those 2 teams kind of finally paid off for me. So that was kind of good to see. I was happy to see that. And then kind of a hot take that I have is London's here to stay as a consistent top 5 team. To me, all year, I mean, I think it was like the first event, their home series in London, because, I mean, the first technically event was Minnesota, but that wasn't like a home series event with like a winner or anything. The first home series event with a winner was London, where Chicago took it. But if I remember right, I think London was up 2-0 on Chicago or Dallas in the semifinal and then got reverse swept. So that was, I think they were up on Dallas 2-0 and they got reverse swept to not make it to the final. So they've been so close so many times. Like, so many times they make it to the second match of their group and then they just choke it away or something. Or they've been just so close so many times. And finally they were able to just squeak it out, get to a final. I think they're here to stay as a top 5 team. I think Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago are for sure here to stay. So those kind of 4 and 5 spots are rotating. But to me, they're kind of like tied with New York. I know they were 1 below in my power rankings, but they're like on the same level for me. Overall, I got OGLA in that 4 slot, but I think like between London and New York and Minnesota, they're all kind of vying for that 5 spot. But I think like London's here to stay as like a consistent top 5, top 6 team, which might be a hot take to some, because some might say, oh, it's 1 event, they're going to fall back into like their 8th or 9th place spot. But I think they're going to be like a top 5, top 4 team that can kind of fight for some event wins now. Then here's like a way too early hot take. Last week I said I think this is going to be the next multi-year, I don't want to say dynasty because that's way too early to say, but next multi-year Hecz Scump roster. I was going to say Hecz formal Scump roster when writing this up, but I don't know, it just feels weird because, I mean, Scump had a full year last year without formal, so this is, the Hecz Scump has been just a thing for so much longer. I mean, they've been together since like BO2 and before and stuff, and formal only came on in AW, so it's a little longer, so just for this, I'm going to say Hecz Scump. Formal's kind of included, but I think this is going to be the next multi-year Hecz Scump roster, like I correctly predicted. It just makes sense on paper and in-game. In-game, we've already talked about this, so we won't get into it, but the roles make a lot of sense. Even in any other title, I think the roles will make sense. And then on paper, and once again, different than most Call of Duty teams, Hecz is constantly thinking about branding, and on paper and branding-wise, this team just makes sense. You've got Scump and Formal, the greatest duo in Call of Duty history. The people that have been with the Green Wall, they're kind of the 2 most iconic Green Wall players. I mean, obviously, other than like Nadeshot, Big T, those like the OG guys, but like in terms of modern Green Wall, like post Nade Shot era. Those are the two easily most iconic members. They're more iconic than Crim and Karma because they were always kind of the two best players in the Dynasty roster. They were the duo. They're the most popular, like, streaming YouTube between the four on that team. So they're kind of the most popular, like, Hecz green wall players. So they're here to stay. They've got their spot solidified unless for some reason Scump kicks out Formal. And then you've got Arcitys and Prestinni. I know Hecz is drooling over the idea to get those two players, but I don't think they want to team with Prestinni at first. But now that they've got him, I mean, it's such a great storyline for Hecz to build off, and you know Hecz is all about the storylines and building his brand, and you've got Arcitys and Prestinni, who are, first of all, both great players in their own right and world champions, but they're also twins, so the content they can make with the best duo in history, Formal and Scump, and then you've got the twins, Arcitys and Prestinni. It kind of just makes for a good content and good story. And then your fifth player, who kind of might feel left out because you got the twins and the duo, but it's Envoy, best player on the team this year, and then he's kind of like that young gun, and you know Hecz is always looking for that because Scump is getting a little older. Not saying Scump's anywhere near the end. I'm sure he could play for many more years. Same with Formal. Arcitys and Prestinni are still younger, but they're not 18. I mean, I think they're in their like early 20s too. So you've got these players who are all getting a little older. I mean, they could still play for many, many more years, not saying that. But then Envoy's like 19 or whatever, 18, 19. He's like the young gunner. Hecz is always kind of looking. That's what he was with TJ and Dashy. He's always kind of looking for those young gunners to kind of take over. And also Envoy's kind of got a good personality. He seems to be pretty good on camera for content and stuff. So it seems like the perfect player for Hecz to kind of mold into like the next Scump, kind of, if you will, where he can like be maybe a force in the content game and really help the brand. So to me, it seems like on paper, brand-wise, in the game, role-wise, everything, they just seem to mesh. The duo, the twins, the young gunner, it just seems like everything is just on point. The only way this roster could be broken up is some way like TJ or Dashy weasel their way back and Scump wants them or something. But to me, I think this is hot, way too early take, but this is the next multi-year Hecz Scump roster, which, I mean, it sounds weird to say, wow, that's a hot take, multi-year, but in COD, we don't see a lot of multi-year rosters. Usually there's at least some changes every year on rosters. Next takeaway, Warzone Weekend, great for the CDL. I think it should stay. The only adjustment I'd have for it is maybe do something with, like, you get points. Like, you get so many points for the win, so many points for kills and stuff, kind of like Fortnite does with their esports and stuff, because, I mean, I'm not taking it too serious. I'm not one of those people that was like, well, Paris camped in the building the whole game, like, take the win away from them. I mean, it was a fun game. It was for fun. It's not that serious. But at the same time, I don't want people to be like, oh, we need to win this $10,000, so we all need to camp in this building. Like, I kind of want it to be like an incentive like Fortnite has for running around and getting kills, because I think not only because, like, not like I'm saying like it's a serious game and we need to like not let building campers win, but I just want to see the teams run around and try to gun each other instead of camping, because like the end zone had a lot of people in it, and I think it'd be more fun if everybody's just flying around going for kills and stuff, just because, I mean, it's a game for fun. We don't want to see teams sweat for the win super hard. We just want to see them fly around and go for crazy plays and stuff. And the only other thing I think that they can improve is they had like the Barstool guy or whatever on OGLA, and I think he was the only non-pro in the game. I guess there were some like substitutes and coaches, but I still kind of consider them in the pro. But I think it'd be kind of fun if like each weekend the franchise picked like 3 people from their team, like coaches, subs, whatever, their organization, and then one celebrity to play with them if the CDL was able to get that in their budget or get players or celebrities to play. Or maybe people from other esports, or either that, or you could have like teams of 4 with the pros, and then maybe just teams of 4 celebrities or whatever. But I think it'd be easier to probably just get one per team, because if you get a bunch of teams of 4, that gets into a lot of celebrities each weekend you've got to contact. But I think it'd be cool if like 3 people from the franchise, whether it's subs, coaches, whatever, owners, Hecz is playing or something, and then one celebrity on each team, or one player from other esports on each team, because I know people are going to complain like, oh, well, why do we need to drag others from outside of Call of Duty esports? But you've got to expand your brain a little bit. I mean, if you're bringing in celebrities, or bringing in pro CS players or pro Overwatch players or pro something else players from any other game, Fortnite, whatever, streamers like Courage or Tim or Ninja or people like that, you might not love those guys, and you might be like, well, they're not part of our esport, we don't want them in here. But you got to expand your mind a little bit. When you bring in people like Tim and Ninja and Courage, they've got huge viewership bases, and there's a very, very good chance that a lot of people that watch Ninja, and I mean, a lot of people that watch Courage might watch competitive COD because of his roots in COD, but there's a lot of people, Ninja's roots are in Halo, nothing with COD really. Tim used to play COD on stream and stuff, but no pro background in COD, and they've got huge viewership bases, and if they even drag 10,000 of their viewers, and out of those 10,000, maybe 9,000 of them don't watch Pro COD, and then all of a sudden even 1,000 from each community say like, wow, this is pretty cool. That's 2,000 new fans, and it could just keep multiplying. So I think they should, if they can, try to get like more celebrities mixed into teams and stuff, just to kind of make it more of a fun showcasey match, because it's nothing serious. It's just fun showcase stuff. This episode's really long, so I kind of want to get through these decently quick. But my last takeaway is that I saw Hecz in the community kind of debating third game modes. This wasn't like a huge argument or something, but they were just kind of talking like, what would be the best third game modes? Because domination is clearly not the answer. So what do we think it should be? And a lot of people are saying like CTF and stuff like that. I saw some people saying Dom, but that's just that no Dom. And then I saw Hecz saying something about War from World at War, I think it was called. I don't know. I can't speak too much on that because I did play World at War, but I was pretty young. I mean, at the time I was like 11 when that game came out, 10. So I don't really remember, if I'm being completely honest, I don't really remember War too much or what it was. So I can't speak and say like that would be a great mode or that would be a terrible mode. But I mean, I trust Hecz' opinion on pretty much everything competitive COD. So I think that he's probably right. That'd probably be a good game mode. But I'm not going to go that direction because, like I said, I don't have a ton of information on the game mode. I don't know much about it. So I can't really say that, yeah, it'd be a great or yeah, it'd be a horrible mode. But for me, I think it should be Control, because I thought last year Control made the most sense of any random game mode. And like, as a player who's been playing competitive COD for 10 years, I think, I mean, like to me, Uplink, CTF, Blitz, Domination, all the modes kind of make sense to me. I mean, Dom is still confusing as a veteran player. Sometimes I'm like, what the heck's going on? And I don't love Blitz, but all those modes make sense to me. But to me, when looking at it from a casual and a new fan perspective, which is what the CDL unfortunately, sometimes fortunately or unfortunately, is doing, they're looking to try to get a lot more casual players and like new people. To me, Control is like the easiest mode to understand, or Capture the Flag, because that's just a basic, I mean, that's a game people play. Like, you got a flag in each base, you got to grab it and bring it back. So to me, Capture the Flag is so much easier to understand, or even Control is so easy to understand because it's simple. You've got a point, one team, or you got 2 points. One team is trying to capture both. One team is trying to defend both. You've each got 30 lives. If you run out of lives, you lose. Each team has like the basic same spawn at all times, and then you go. And it's the first team to, what was it, 2 round wins or 3 round wins? I can't remember if it was first team to 3 or 2. It's been a little bit since I played BO4. But to me, it's so simple for a new player to understand. Okay, each team has a certain amount of lives. One team's defending the objectives, one team's capturing it. If you capture both, you win the round. If one team runs out of lives, then the other team that didn't run out of lives wins. And you have the same spawns. So like, sometimes people can get confused with like, well, why are they spawning there? Why are they spawning there? Well, it's easy to understand. They're always spawning there. You've got to cap this. You've got to get this many kills. You only have a certain amount of lives. It's easy to understand. So I think it's good. And I think it was fun to play, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys feel. So my opinion that it should be Control. But I'd also be okay with it being CTF, or I don't know how you guys feel about this. I'd like to know what you think. I mean, I think it could even go back to like the BO3 style. Personally, like Black Ops 3, for some reason, I don't know what it was about it, but for me, it was like my favorite game to watch. I liked watching. I mean, some people hate the jetpack games, but I personally loved the jetpack games and loved watching them because they just brought new flair, and like, they weren't, like, sometimes boots games can get kind of monotonous because they're kind of the same thing, same strategies all the time, but like the crazy plays you could make with specialists and jetpacks and stuff. I know it wasn't maybe as like high competitive integrity, but the crazy plays you could make with jetpacks and flying around and getting crazy kills and stuff, and like BO3 was just so entertaining to me. So maybe they could go back to a 4 mode thing like they had in BO3, because in BO3 it went hardpoint, search, hardpoint, search, uplink, CTF, search. So there's only one hardpoint, and then they had uplink and CTF, so they had 4 different game modes. So I think you could maybe do something like that on, I mean, you really can't have uplink in like a boots game because it doesn't really work, but the wall running and throwing is kind of what you need in uplink, and it's airborne and stuff. So I think you could do like hardpoint, then search, then control, then CTF, and then search again. I think that could be a possible idea. I don't 100% think teams would be on board for that because teams really like to play hardpoint, but that's an idea. But then if somehow we ever go back to jetpack games, uplink's got to be, an uplink's like the GOAT game mode. I love that game mode. So that's going to be it for my takeaways. This one ran a little long, like I said, but But I wanted to thank you guys all again so much for the crazy support on the last video. I mean, we got a record in likes, a record in new subs, a record in views, view time, everything was way up. So that means a ton to me. I also have some new ideas for content fillers besides maybe just doing the podcast as the year kind of winds down. And I kind of want to save some of them for after champs because there's going to be, I mean, like a 4 or 5 month lull in between now, or in between like the end of the year and when the new game comes out and we start to have content. And like we might have off-season like roster rumors and stuff that I might touch on. But I have some new ideas for content fillers, maybe like going back and saying like who I think was the best player in each game, or like what player or what team I'd pick in this game or this game if I had like a certain budget or something, or like do one of those videos. But yeah, I have some ideas for content fillers, so just let me know if you want to see that, like besides the podcast, if you'd like to see some of those like throwback competitive COD type videos talking about like players and stuff. But once again, thank you for that crazy support on the last video. This has been the post Seattle episode, and I'll be coming back at you guys with another podcast video next week. I can't remember where the event is now, but I'll be talking about my predictions and stuff just like I always do for that event. So thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, comment some of your thoughts on my predictions and my takeaways and stuff and what you guys think, and I will see you in the next one.